Hi, I'm Kitty Felde. We continue our series of episodes highlighting banned and challenged books. This week, it's Elizabeth Acevedo's novel, The Poet X. The novel in verse was challenged in 2020 by parents in North Carolina who argued that the book was unconstitutionally hostile to religion. The challenge was turned down by the courts. It was again challenged in 2023 in Wisconsin because of objections about frank language about sex. In both cases, the books were part of the high school's curriculum. So we present to you today the Unchallenged Book Club for Kids podcast discussion of The Poet X.
It's the book club for kids.
The book club for kids.
It's the book club for kids.
It's the book club for kids podcast.
Hi, I'm Kitty Felde. This week, it's all about poetry and body image and standing up for yourself. It's the National Book Award-winning novel, The Poet X, by Elizabeth Acevedo. Readers from Charles Hart Middle School in Washington, D.C. say they love the main character, Ziamora.
She's not afraid to stand up for what she believes in, no matter the consequences.
They also love the writing within the writing, as our protagonist works on a class assignment to write her own biography.
She knew since she was little. The world would not sing her triumphs, but she took all of the stereotypes and put them in a chokehold until they breathed out the truth.
That's our celebrity reader, actress Monica Vigil. Our writer, Elizabeth Acevedo, talks about another class assignment where a college professor's dismissal of her work inspired her to keep on writing. He said,
"You need more experiences." As if he knew absolutely anything about my life or what I had lived or the experiences that informed my work.
This is the Book Club for Kids, the show where kids talk about books. We'll tell you how you can be on the show a little bit later on, but first, let's meet our readers.
My name is Jakaya.
My name is Morgan.
My name is Samaje, and we are all 8th graders at Charles Hart Middle School in D.C.
The book is The Poet X. What's it about?
It's about a young girl named Ziamora trying to find herself, and she goes to school and her teacher tells her that she should be a poet, and so as the story goes on, she decides, she just writes her ideas down, a notebook that her brother gave her when they were younger. And so ever since then, she would write down her thoughts about it. And so sooner or later, she ended up going to a poetry slam and sang a poet about her life.
It's also about how Ziamora her mom is very religious, and so she kind of finds out that she doesn't really want to be as religious as her mom would like her to be, and so she kind of starts to like a boy, and she starts to write poetry about it, and so sooner or later her mom ends up finding out about it, and then it's a whole conflict, it's a problem, and she has to kind of try to find herself and find her voice.
What kind of person is she?
Independent person and a strong-minded person.
I would say she is definitely very bold, and she has a lot of courage. She's not afraid to stand up for what she believes in, no matter the consequences.
Body image plays a big part in this book. Talk a little bit about what she says and what other people say.
So in the book, she describes herself as very curvy, and every time she would go out, grown men would try to get her attention even though she's underage, and she would feel very uncomfortable about that and insecure about her body.
Is that something you've experienced?
Not really, but if I was to experience it, I would feel very uncomfortable also.
I've definitely experienced that, especially because of my height, so I look a little bit more older than I actually am, and it is very uncomfortable.
Same thing as they said.
How do you react?
I get mad or I just go tell my mom.
Well, how do you react?
I kind of look them up and down, and I let them know that I'm not of age, and I don't like that.
Does that happen a lot? I mean, do you think it's gotten better? Of course, you guys are just becoming young women, so you're shaking your head no.
I think no, because as our generation gets older, a lot of people, they look a certain way. And so you might be 12 and look 15 or 14, and nobody will ever know that unless you tell them.
If anything, I definitely think it might just get worse, simply because I noticed that this generation kind of matured a lot faster than the last generation, and so I think that might kind of become a part of the problem.
Do you think boys are any smarter now than they were in previous generations? Have they learned anything?
I think so.
Okay. So tell me, do you think you guys are going to react any different than, say, your moms did or your aunts did?
Yes. This generation, I don't want to say we would react more violently, but I think we would be definitely more aggressive towards men and let them know, like, that is not okay. Whereas back in the day, they might have kind of been a little bit calmer with it, and I think we would be more aggressive because now it's like more of a problem.
Well, let's hear some more from our main character as she writes about herself. Our celebrity reader is actress Monica Vigil, who, by the way, plays FINA's older sister Gabby in our other podcast, the FINA Mendoza Mysteries.
Rough Draft Assignment 2. Last paragraphs of my biography. And that's how Xiomara, bare-knuckled, fought the world into calling her correctly by her name, into not expecting her to be a saint, into respecting her as a whole grown-ass woman. She knew since she was little the world would not sing her triumphs, but she took all of the stereotypes and put them in a chokehold until they breathed out the truth. Xiomara may be remembered as a lot of things. A student, a miracle, a protective sister, a misunderstood daughter. But most importantly, she should be remembered as always working to become the warrior she wanted to be. Final draft of Assignment 2. What I actually turn in. Xiomara Batista. Monday, October 15. Miss Galliano. Last paragraphs of my biography. Final draft. Xiomara's accomplishments amounted to several key achievements. She was a writer who went on to create a nonprofit organization for first-generation teenage girls. Her center helped young women explain to their parents why they should be allowed to date and go away for college and move out when they turned 18. Also, how to discover what they wanted to do in life. It was an organization that helped thousands of young women, and although they never built a statue outside the center, she would have hated that, they did hang a super blown-up selfie of her in the main office. Since her parents were distraught that the neighborhood had changed, that there were no more Latino families, and the bodegas and sastreria were all closed down, Xiomara used her earnings to buy them a house in the Dominican Republic. Although she was never married and didn't have children, Xiomara was happy with a big pit bull and a brownstone in Harlem not too far from the neighborhood where she was raised.
Talk to me about her relationship with her mother.
I would say it was definitely complicated because she loved her mother loved her, but because her mother was so, I don't want to say strict, but she just had a certain way of dealing with Xiomara, and because Xiomara had a twin brother, and so the way Xiomara saw it was like she felt that her mother liked her brother better than her, and so that kind of, I want to say that was one of the reasons why she would rebel in the first place. And so definitely at first it was complicated, but towards the end they found a way to deal with each other.
I feel the same way. Like, me and Xiomara, we have something in common because both of our moms are strict and very religious. And sometimes me and my mom, we would bump heads, and she would favor my brother more because, like, my mom and my brother, they have such a good bond. And it's just, like, it felt like Xiomara tries to have a good bond with her mom, but every time she tries, her mom doesn't personally care. She just cares about what her brother does, and she wants Xiomara to be exactly like her brother.
Well, does your mom want you to be like your brother, or does she just get along better with your brother?
She gets along better with my brother, but my dad, he favors me more than my brother. But it's just like, my mom wants me to be a decent child, so that's why we get in arguments a lot. And I'm just like, I'm not going to be that person you want me to be. I'm going to be myself.
One thing about Xiomara is I felt that her relationship with her mother was definitely impacted by how religious her mother was, because Xiomara didn't feel as though she was kind of questioning, like, is there really a God? And that may be blasphemous, but I mean, she just didn't feel right, like, being as religious as her mother wanted her to be. And so a lot of the time, the thing with her mother and Xiomara was that they would get into like arguments, or not arguments, but they would get into conflict over religion.
Let's talk about the poetry in this book. Did it make it a different book? Did you like the poetry? Did it speak to you?
Okay, so the poetry in this book I would say it's very different. The poetry, it was kind of like metaphorical, but it wasn't one of those poetry books that you couldn't get the grasp of what she was saying. It was metaphorical in the sense that it spoke to you and really made you feel like you were a part of what she was going through.
I feel the same way, but also it's like I grasp to that more so than probably like a lot of people here, because like it's easier to understand a teen's point of view than an adult's point of view, because they might not understand the teen's point of view like we would understand a teen's point of view. And like the way she wrote it, you could understand it. And I also like that she didn't really rhyme with every single word. And I like rhyming like poems, don't get me wrong, but I like straightforward, like get to the point. And poetry that rhymes is just so long because you have to rhyme every single word, but she didn't like rhyme every single word.
Well, what's the difference between the poetry she writes and, say, lyrics to music?
She put out like how she felt about boys, how she felt about her religion and other stuff, but the music we listen to today, it just talks about random stuff that is not applicable to our era.
The book is like a poetry, but the way she written it is like it's like a regular story, like a regular book. And she put it like so we could have a better understanding of what's going on and what's her point of view about the whole thing.
It's written in prose and then it's written in poetry, and they worked really well together.
Yeah.
The way that she wrote the poetry, it kind of makes you feel like the book actually feels a lot shorter than what it is. But that's one thing that I also like, because reading books, don't get me wrong, I love reading. I like reading long books and stuff, but it kind of just, it makes you want to read more.
Our writer, Elizabeth Acevedo, says she's often asked why she wrote The Poet X.
The truth of it is that I've been a writer my whole life, but I never thought I would write a novel. I was a poet. I was also a poet who was an 8th grade English teacher in Prince George's County, Maryland. And the school that I taught at was 78% Latinx. It was 20% Black. And I'm in this space, and although I'm teaching 8th grade, a lot of my students are very low-level readers. So they were 4th, 5th, 6th grade reading levels. And I kept trying to do everything I could to hook these students into reading, right? That I fundamentally believe that the reason that I am where I am is because I was a voracious reader growing up. I was a reader before I was a writer. That to me, I found answers in books. The things I couldn't ask my mother, the things I couldn't understand about my neighborhood or about why I was treated certain ways, I looked to books for answers. And so I'm trying to, this is the one key I have that I could maybe give these students who reflect the same background, and it's completely being rejected. And I had this one student, Catherine Bolaños, who, if I was in 8th grade, we would have been best friends, but because I was her teacher, I was like, she was just a tough cookie. And she was not where she needed to be in terms of reading. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get her to be a reader. So I bring in Twilight, I bring in Hunger Games, right? I bring in whatever book I could bring. And Catherine's like, I don't care about no sparkly vampires, I don't care about none of this. And she said to me, where are the books about us? How come we never read any books about us? And so I go out, and with my teacher budget, I buy Sandra Cisneros, I buy Meg Medina, I buy Matt de la Peña, I buy Jack Lee Woodson, right? I buy Walter Dean Myers. I bring all these stories into class, and this student who had never been a huge reader within 2 weeks had finished every book I put in front of her. And so after my second year of teaching, I decided I was gonna go get my master's in creative writing. And I walked into a program, and I was the only student of Latinx descent. I was the only student of Afro descent. And I was the only person who was born and raised in a major city and was writing about that experience. And so I would turn in all these poems, these hood morenita poems, and I would get them back, and the slang would be circled, and the Spanish would have question marks. And I had this one professor, my first year of school, who was an old school dude. So he came to class and he's like, I just read the most amazing poem about deer. And I have no beef with deer. I think venison is delicious. I'm not hating on anybody's wildlife. But I think we often have a stereotype about poetry, that it's about the clouds and the flowers and the deer. And for 2.5 hours, because grad school classes are long, this professor goes on and on about this deer poem. And then he goes one step further. He says, I want everybody in the room to write an animal ode. Right? And he goes to one classmate. He's like, what do you think you'd write about? And my classmate says, well, like Elizabeth Bishop, I would write about the blackbird. And then my professor gets to me. And the one piece of writing advice you always get when you're in a writing program or when you're in an English class is write what you know. And so I puff my chest up and I'm like, well, I would write about rats. If you grow up in any major city, you some rats, right? Pigeons are just rats with wings. Squirrels are just rats with nice coats. We know them all, right? And I feel like I'm on Family Feud, like, good answer. To the rat. Because you are not the admired nightingale. Because you are not the noble doe. Because you are not the picturesque ermine, armadillo, or bat. They have been written, and I don't know their song the way I know you're scuttling between walls. The scent of your collapsed corpse rotting beneath floorboards. Your frantic squeal as you pull at your own fur from glue traps, ripping flesh from skin in an attempt to survive. Because in July of 97, you birthed a legion on 109th, swarmed from behind the dumpsters, made our streets infamous for something other than crack. Shoot, we nicknamed you Cat Killer. Raced with you through open hydrants, squeaked like you when Siete blasted aluminum bat into your brethren's skull. The sound slapped down dominoes. You reigned that summer rat, and even when they sent exterminators, half dead and on fire, you pushed on. Because even though you are an inelegant, simple, mammal bottom feeder, always freaking famished, little ugly thing, who feasts on what crumbs fall from the corners of our mouths. You live uncuddled, uncoddled, can't be bought at Petco and fed to fat snakes because you are not the maze rat of labs, pale, pretty-eyed, trained. You raise yourself, sharp-fanged, clawed-scarred, patched dark. Because of this, he should love you. But look at the beast, the poet tells me. The table is already full. And rat, you are not a right-worthy thing. Every time they say that, take your gutter, your dirt coat, filth this page, rat. Scrape your underbelly against street concrete. You better squeak and raise the whole world, rat. Let loose a plague of words, rat, and remind them that you, that I, we are worthy of every poem. Here. And my professor looks at me and goes, rats are not noble enough creatures for a poem. Liz, I think you need more experiences. And I think both statements are devastating in different ways. The idea that someone who comes from a family that is from the Dominican Republic, which was the first place colonized in the Western Hemisphere, colonized by Christopher Columbus himself, by nobility, that is what I am supposed to be writing towards. But then that second piece, you need more experiences. As if he knew absolutely anything about my life or what I had lived or the experiences that informed my work. And I still wrote that poem. It's called Rat Ode. It's an official clap back to that professor. But mainly it serves as a reminder for any of us who have ever been told our story is too small or too ugly or too different for high art, that we are all of us deserving of poetry.
Was this book like anything else you've read before?
No. I want to say one thing that made this book stand out was the poetry. I've read poetry, like books that have poetry in it before, but definitely nothing like this, solely because I could relate to this book a lot more than any of the other books that I've read. So I think that's one thing that really made it stand out for me.
The thing that stood out from the book was the cover, because it gave out a whole personality of what she's going to be like.
I agree with Samanje, because certain books that I read, it doesn't have like a main character. Sorry, it doesn't have a main character that I can relate to or is around the same age as me. And that book, it like specifically points out her details or her flaws and stuff that maybe that a lot of teens our age have, that she's comfortable writing down and speaking out of poetry. So, yeah.
Let's get to the hard part, which is telling us your favorite book and why you love it.
I would say my favorite book is definitely this one. That's a bit of a coincidence, but it's definitely this one because this is a book that I can read over and over again, and I would never get tired of it. And I can definitely relate to this book in many different ways. Another one of my favorite books is I Survived the Sinking of the Titanic. Oh my gosh, yes.
Why?
I like books that kind of put you in a perspective of being in something that you may have heard about that happened in the past.
I don't remember what's the title called, but I remember that it's about two girls who go to their grandma's house. The next thing they end up knowing that their grandma is like a type of witch. I like mystery, suspenseful, and what else? Comedy, put it all together in one book.
And that's what this book had.
Yep. I figured out what it's called, The Sister Grimm's.
All right. Favorite book?
The Hate You Give. I like that book because like it's like kind of, it's not like this one, but it gives like a teen's background and how she grew up and how she wants to stop society from being the way it is, because she's from like a rougher part of the area and she just wants to make sure her family is safe. And because her best friend, he got shot not doing anything, and so ever since that she just wants a powerful message to get through, like not every Black person you see on the street is a bad influence or something like that. I can't relate to it, but the people my brother hang out with can relate to that. And my dad, back in the day, he lost his friend from like something like that. Ever since he told me that, I just like reading about stuff like that to find a way, like not that I can stop it, but like to write about it or to think like if I was in that situation, what would I do?
What about you, Monica Vigil? What is your favorite book?
My favorite book of all time is always the book I have just read. But my favorite book right now is Love You Forever by Robert Munsch. It's about the evolving relationship between a mom and her son. And it's so beautiful and makes me so happy. And it makes me think of my mother every time I read it. She used to read it to me when I was young. And that is why Love You Forever is my favorite book.
We'll have a list of everybody's favorite book at our website, bookclubforkids.org. And if you have a favorite book, you can be on the Book Club for Kids podcast too. Just get out a smartphone, open up the voice memo app, and tell us your first name, the city where you live, the name of your favorite book, and why you love it. And then email the audio to us at kitty@bookclubforkids.org. That's kitty@bookclubforkids.org. Thanks this week to producer Ilse Setziel. Brandon Baker composed our theme with additional music from Charles Nillman. Emma Steinkellner designed our logo. Thanks to the Library of Congress National Book Festival for sharing audio with Elizabeth Acevedo. And thanks to our readers this week, Jakaya, Morgan, Samaje, and librarian Najima Assad at Charles Hart Middle School in Washington, D.C. And thanks as well to our celebrity reader this week, Monica Vigil, who, by the way, returns in the character of Gabby, the older sister, in Season 2 of the FINA Mendoza Mysteries podcast.
She has more confidence in being a lady detective.
Subscribe now to the FINA Mendoza Mysteries. We have a free newsletter full of free tips about how to get kids to pick up a book and actually read it. Sign up at our website, bookclubforkids.org. I'm Kitty Felde. Thanks again for listening.